Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So, as you know, Monday means it's Modern Monday here in Instant Deck Tech land, and we have a really spicy list to check out today. This is Smallpox, built around one of my favorite kinda unplayed cards in Modern, Smallpox itself, and this list recently took Inko Fumito to an undefeated finish in a Japanese tournament, so congrats to Inko on their finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break down the deck: if you enjoy this deck and you want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So Smallpox is built around the namesake card, Smallpox itself, and Smallpox is a really powerful effect, but it's symmetrical, so it takes a bit of work to really build around it. Basically, for only 2 mana, it makes each player sack a land, sack a creature, discard a card, and lose a life. So this hits both players. So the trick to Smallpox, and there's a few of them, is somehow making it so when you Smallpox, it hurts your opponent more than it hurts you. And we've seen decks kind of try to use Smallpox in like 8-rack strategies, and that's fine, but this deck goes a really different direction that's really sweet. So one of the card types that Smallpox doesn't impact is planeswalkers. So the repeatable value this deck is looking to generate comes from cards like Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, Elspeth Knight Errant, Liliana the Veil. So if we can get these down, these are planeswalkers that'll stay on the battlefield. They generate a ton of advantage, mostly by making tokens. Liliana works well with Smallpox because it continues to pressure the opponent's hand, making them discard more cards, sack more creatures, and eventually any of these cards have the power of winning the game on their own. So if we can get one of these down and then kind of keep everyone's resources low with Smallpox by sacrificing lands and creatures and discarding cards, our planeswalkers are likely going to win us the game. Another neat trick in this deck is one of the few creatures that the deck actually plays, and that's Monastery Mentor. So Monastery Mentor, the sweet thing about this one is when you cast your Smallpox, Mentor will trigger to make a 1/1 monk token, and that will resolve before the Smallpox, so you simply sack the token, which counts as you're sacrificing a creature, while your opponent's probably going to have to sack a real creature, a Tarmogoyf or a Siege Rhino or whatever they have on the battlefield. So you're sacking a 1/1 that you can easily generate again by casting another spell, while your opponent has to sacrifice a real creature. So that's one way you can break the symmetry. Also, Mentor can just kind of take over the game, apart from the planeswalkers and a very small number of creatures. The rest of the deck is just spells, discard, removal. So Monastery Mentor is going to trigger often in this deck. The last creatures in the main deck are Dark Confidant, which comes down on turn 2, generates some card advantage, takes advantage of the fact that our deck is pretty cheap. We can also usually keep it alive through a Smallpox thanks to our planeswalkers that make tokens, Monastery Mentor, or Lingering Souls, which gives us a 1/1 we can sacrifice to Smallpox. Lingering Souls also gives us a good card to discard to Smallpox, so if our opponent's discarding a real card that they had plans for, and we're discarding a Lingering Souls, which we can flashback for 2 spirits, another way we can break the symmetry. The rest of the deck, maybe my favorite card in this entire deck, is 4 copies of Mana Tithe, the full 4 of. Mana Tithe is one of the ultimate gotcha cards. It's essentially Force Spike, but it's in white, and no one really expects a counter spell out of your white-black deck. And it also works especially well in this deck because of Smallpox taxing your opponent's lands. It's much harder to play around a Mana Tithe, which is pretty easy to do once you know about it. You'll get some the first time, but after that, they're probably going to play around Mana Tithe. But if you can make your opponent sack their lands with Smallpox, they might be forced to just play their stuff into Mana Tithe. And when you can 1 mana counter a 3 or 4 mana play from your opponent, that's a huge swing in your favor. Then we have a bunch of discard, pretty typical for black decks in Modern: Inquisitions, Thought Seizes, Collective Brutality, which not only is discard but does other things as as well. And then a bunch of removal, Fatal Push over Path to Exile, interesting choice, but we're sacking stuff to Smallpox, we got some fetch lands, so it's pretty easy to trigger Revolt. Go for the throw and a Murderous Cut. And then Death Cloud, just a one of, is kind of like a powered up backup Smallpox. We don't have a ton of ways to ramp into it, so unlike a true Death Cloud deck, we're not like generating a ton of mana and then casting this X5 or X6, but we can cast it X1, X2, sacrifice a few things. Works very well with Planeswalkers, just like Smallpox, because it gets rid of everything except Planeswalkers, essentially. So if we can get down our Planeswalkers first, Death Cloud can close out the game. As far as the mana base, we have a few special lands. Flagstones is for Smallpox. When we sack it, we get another plane, so it's like a free land to sack. So we have all these weird little synergies that kind of together help us swing the Smallpox in our favor, even though it's a symmetrical card. Tech Edge to kill opponent's land, Shambling Vent to attack with, Urborg for fixing, and then just a bunch of black-white duels, including the 4 Marsh Flats to trigger Revolt, and some basic lands. In the sideboard, a bunch more removal, and then we have Wrath of God and Lingering Souls, which are good against aggro decks. Lingering Souls just makes a ton of blockers, Wrath sweeps away the board, and then some kind of just scattered stuff. Fragmentize, in case we gotta get rid of, I don't know, an Ensnaring Bridge or something. Duress for combo to attack our opponent's hand even more. We can have a ton of discard in this deck if we sideboard in Duress. Surgical for graveyards, and then Suppression Field to kind of hate on fetches. While we do have the Marsh Flats, if we are going up against it, it's playing like 10 or 12 fetches, and we only have 4 fetches, it's another symmetrical effect that this deck can kind of break and swing in its favor. And then just a Spell Skite to protect against burn spells, removal spells, and everything else. And that is Smallpox for Modern, and that's been our Instant Deck Tech for today. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.